All right, so what we did on Tuesdays, we talked about hypothesis testing in general, and we went over the 5 steps of the hypothesis. I'm going to keep beating this into you guys, and then we'll look at some problems in 10.1. So there's 5 steps to the hypothesis testing process. Let's see, the first step is identify your null and alternate hypothesis. You will have H naught and HA. The homework sometimes calls this H1. And it will be 2 things. In chapter 10, we're just doing one sample things in chapter 10. So we'll see things like probability equals or mu equals. Hnet is always a statement of equality. The alternate can be less than, it can be greater than, or it can be not equal to. And then whatever we have as the value here is the same value here. StatCrunch is going to auto do that for us, as you'll see. And this step right here, this is the only step that really changes for all of the tests. Each test has their own H naught and HA. Steps 2 and 3 are interchangeable. One of them is find the test statistic. And p-value. Using StatCrunch. The other is identify alpha, which is our level of significance. If none is given, use 0.05. And this is related to confidence intervals, as we'll see in the main course today. Is ready for the next steps? If you need it longer, say something, because I'm going to turn the page. Step 4 is compare p-value and alpha. If the p-value is less than alpha, we have a scenario with the p-value too low, reject the hoe. We're going to reject H naught, the null hypothesis. We're going to support HA. Then if p-value is greater than or equal to alpha, p-value is not too low. Do not reject H naught. Do not support HA. And there is not enough evidence to support HA's claim. This is the knots. All right, step 5. Concluding statement, which is always about HA. Always about the alternate hypothesis. In a scenario where the p-value is less than alpha, we'll say there we are supporting HA, so we must have enough evidence to do it. There is sufficient evidence to support the claim. And then paraphrase HA here. If p-value is greater than or equal to alpha. Here we are not supporting HA. There is not enough evidence. Support the claim. And again, paraphrase HA here. Right, you guys ready for some examples? Look at StatCrunch, see what we got. Rude. I'm gonna show you like the two main spots that we're gonna be using StatCrunch today. Both of them are where we've done confidence intervals before. So we're gonna do stats, proportion stats, one sample with summary for most of them. And you just enter shit like we normally do for confidence intervals, but instead of clicking on confidence interval, you leave it as the hypothesis test. I wanted to point out, look at this, when you change the p-value here, it changes the, or not p-value, p. P-value is different. It changes p there. So it automatically updates that. What is this? I'll have to check that out a little bit. And then the other one is where we were doing means. So we'll do stats, t-stats, one sample. And again, hypothesis test works the same way. It's just like the confidence interval. You go to the same menu and you enter the same information. So here it says the null and alternate hypothesis are given. Determine whether the hypothesis test is left-tailed, right-tailed, or two-tailed. What parameter is being tested? Well, the arrow tells us what type of tail it is. This is pointing to the right, so it's a right-tailed test. And what parameter is being tested? We're testing populations. P is for proportion, so population proportion. That's an easy question. It says, suppose the null hypothesis is rejected. This is question number 2. State the conclusion based on the results of the test. So if the null hypothesis is rejected, we're supporting the alternate hypothesis. Whatever it is, we don't know what it is. It says 6 years ago, 12.5% of registered births were to teenage mothers. A sociologist believes that the percentage has decreased since then. The 12.5% of registered births, that's H0, that's the null hypothesis. The sociologist believes that the percentage has gone down, which means that's our alternate hypothesis. That's the one that we're supporting. So there is sufficient evidence to conclude that the percentage of teenage mothers has decreased. We gotta find that one. And we want the is, not the is not. This is question number 3. State the conclusion based on the results of the test. According to the report, the standard deviation of monthly cell phone bills was 49.81%, $49.81 3 years ago. A researcher suspects that the standard deviation of monthly cell phone bills is less today. The null hypothesis is not rejected, which means if the null hypothesis is not rejected, we can't support the alternate one. And the alternate one is that it's less. So we're looking for there is not enough evidence. And only one of these says there's not enough evidence. There is not sufficient evidence to conclude that the standard deviation of monthly cell phone bills is less than its level 3 years ago. So the nots go together. Not rejected, not enough evidence. All right, now they actually want us to set up the null hypothesis and alternate hypothesis. They use H1, not HA. A can of soda is labeled as containing 10 fluid ounces. The quality control manager wants to verify that the filling machine is not overfilling the cans. So he must think it's doing more. Complete parts A through D. Well, there's no way we're going to have a percentage here. So I'm guessing he's going to have something about the mean, the average number of ounces. So something with the average here. And the average should equal that 10 ounces. He thinks it might be higher. That's what he's worried about. So we're going to say that the average is greater than 10. That's it on that one. So chapter 10 is 10.1 at least, is checking to see how well you understand what's going on with hypothesis tests and how this stuff works. If we reject H0, we support HA. If we do not reject H0, we do not support HA. Here it looks like they gave us some evidence. The quality control manager obtains a sample of 75 cans and measures the contents. And the sample evidence leads the manager to reject the null hypothesis. If we reject the null, we support the alternate. So there is sufficient evidence to conclude that the machine, is out of calibration. That's a weird way of saying it because they didn't say out of calibration up here. That's a fucking shitty change of sentence. But if the machine is overfilling, it must be out of calibration. It's not calibrated correctly. Suppose, in fact, the machine is not out of calibration. Has a type 1 error or type 2 error been made? So type 1 error is when we reject H0 and we shouldn't have. It's like convicting an innocent person. So we rejected H0 and we shouldn't have. So this is a type 1 error. A type 1 error has been made since the sample evidence led the quality control manager to reject the null hypothesis when the null hypothesis is actually true. So these two have got to be in conflict. He rejected it even though it's correct. And all that's in the slideshow. I linked the slideshow in the announcements. I believe I did. I'll check that in a second. Management has informed the quality control department that it does not want to shut down the filling machine unless the evidence is overwhelming that the machine is out of calibration. What level of significance would you recommend the quality control manager use? Explain. You want it low, 0.01. 0.05 is sufficient, 0.01 is overwhelming. it makes the error small, the probability of it happening smaller because it's really small. And so it's got to really be out of fucking whack to be caught by the 1%. Any questions so far? Question number 5. The manager of a certain engine treatment claims that you add the product to your engine. If you add their product, it will be protected from excessive wear. This sounds like some fucking Chevron shit. An infomercial claims that a woman drove 3 hours without oil thanks to the engine treatment. A magazine tested engines in which they added the treatment to the motor oil, ran the engines, drained the oil, and then determined the time until the engine ceased. Complete parts A through B. So the null hypothesis is what the infomercial is going to claim. They're saying that it's 3 hours. This is not a proportion. That's got to be, it's a quantitative measure, so we got to be dealing with a mean. So the mean equals 3. It doesn't really say what HA is. It doesn't say if they're just checking for less than or greater than, so we're going to assume not equal to. Really? I don't know where this one's going. Is it going for less than or more than? We're trying to see if it'll do more than, maybe? Less than? That was bad. This is very poorly worded. There was there's nothing that said less than or anything like that. Both engines took exactly 12 minutes to seize. What conclusion might the magazine make based on this evidence? Well, based on that little tiny bit, I would say the claim is not true. 3 hours sounds like bullshit if both tests gave 12 minutes. That was a lame fucking question. That's really lame. The similar question or try again feature is not available for this question. When the check answer button changes to final check, you have one more chance to answer. If you answer incorrectly, you will be marked wrong. What is at the heart of hypothesis testing? This is a reading assessment question. Be certain your answer because you only get one attempt. We make assumption about reality. I even told you guys that on Tuesday. When we led with it, the assumption about what I was doing was that the deck was fair. And then with some sample evidence, you made the assumption that the deck was not fair. That it looked like I was stacking the deck. This is C. And that's it. That's it for 10.1. We'll be doing stuff with 10.2 and 10.3 today. And we'll go over sample problems on next Tuesday on it. I recommend strongly that you try to do the homework problems for 10.2 and 10.3 before Tuesday, before you see me do it. Because if you watch me do it, there's a good chance you're gonna be inclined to just mimic what I'm doing. And then you're not thinking and you're not gonna do well in the final. So try to do the problems on your own. We will have examples in class. You can check the examples that we do in class. But like before we go over some of the homework questions on Tuesday, try to do them yourself for your own benefit. It's not worth enough homework points for these few sections to affect your grade by just getting them right. Your grade is more affected by getting that final exam right. So try to do them normally. And I guess we'll pause this for today.